Good evening and welcome to the Book Club of California's in-person and online program titled Picture, Book, Talk. Again, thank you for joining us here in the club rooms and for joining us out there on Zoom. My name is Kevin Kosick and I'm the Executive Director for the Book Club of California, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all and host the webinar this evening. We have about 30 folks who have registered to join us in person and about 90 people, I think, who've registered to join us online. So we have quite a nice crowd for tonight's program and event. For those of you that might be new to the Book Club of California, we are a nonprofit member and donor supported organization that is dedicated to preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. Oftentimes we do that with a focus on the history and the literature of California and the West. The book club publishes limited edition, finely made books. If you're here in the club rooms, you can see them over there against that wall. We also have a scholarly journal called our quarterly newsletter, and we have keepsakes for our members. We host a year-round series of lectures and presentations and programs like the one this evening on all types of things, including fine printing, design, typography, bookbinding, collecting, and much, much more. Now, if you're not a member of the book club, or if your membership has lapsed and you're interested in what we do, we ask you to consider joining our century-long tradition by becoming a member. Our membership dues are modest and the benefits are many, and we simply can't do the work of the book club with the support of our members and our donors. So please check us out online at bccbooks.org. And now for tonight's program and our presenter. The program is titled Picture, Book, Talk. And our presenter is photographer and teacher, David Wing. Now, David Wing is a third-generation Californian, and he has photographed the life and landscape of the American West for the past 55 years, starting as an infant, right? He chose a major in visual arts at UCSD when that department opened in 1967, and then continued graduate study in photography at the School of Design when Cal Arts opened in 1970. He received fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts in 1977 and 1981, and from the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation in 1980. His work can be seen in the Museum of Modern Art, New York, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and special collections departments of the Getty Research Library, Occidental College, and UCSD libraries. David has taught basic through large format photography. He has offered a wide range of specialty courses, including photographing public events and variations of the artist's book. Prior to his retirement from teaching in 2003, he offered seminars titled The Creative Process and Why People Photograph. Throughout his time as a teacher, David steadily pursued his own fieldwork. Now retired from teaching and curating, he is focused on editing and sharing his substantial film and digital archive with a series of short-run monographs and brief biographical works. Tonight, David will talk about how his camera found its subjects, what his working mind is like today, and how his accumulated work has aged in his intellect and in his heart. Now, if you have questions for our speaker, you can use the chat and the Q&A function on Zoom. We will have time at the end of the presentation to take questions from the audience here in the club rooms and from our virtual audience on Zoom, and I'll come back up to the front to help to do that. I know that David has also brought a number of his books with him, and if you're here in the club rooms, we're going to reopen the library at the end of the talk for you to take a look at them and see if you're interested in acquiring any of his works. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, again, photographer and teacher, David Wing.
Am I on here? Thank you. Okay, well, you know my name and you'll be seeing a lot of it because we'll be looking at some book covers and some book content. Thank you, Kevin. An instant friend and a
Can you
wonderfully
speak
curious.
into the speaker, please?
I have one here. And a wonderfully curious and supportive curator here, director of the book club. So I have decided to use this wonderful audience, which the book club has shared with me, as guinea pigs. And I'm going to try to show you everything I've done up until now. And that will allow me to set it aside because it's in print in the back room. You'll be able to browse those later. And then move on with other projects that are in a big chart on my wall. And I have a lot more to do. And I'm not pushing 75 anymore. 75 is pushing me. So I am anxious to keep things rolling. Okay, so I've got the device here and let's move very quickly. It'll look fast and I have about 7 seconds per slide. And I have a little script that tells me how fast to go. And I do want to get done because I have some treats for you. Okay. So there's a little translation here from one application to another. So my wonderful typography with square bullets has been modified with a font substitution, but that won't bother us in the future. I changed my order and the workflow here, and some of it's not there, but you get the idea. I'm going to go through all of this, what I've got, and how it works for me, and where books come from. And I'll try to talk as little as possible. This is the way I usually put together a slideshow, which is about every 5 years. I get a bunch of pictures, I have a bunch of things to say, and then I just start. So I did that here. This is the photographer's dilemma. Like, where do you stand? And if you look at this, you'll see 3 tripod holes only. So I either got exactly the right place right away, or I gave up. I was thinking of using type. And then I said, this is the way I put the talk together. I scribbled on some tent cards and I threw all the pictures into piles. And so you're going to see how I think, which I never share. A little bit of history. This is my mother in her 90s. When she was 16, she did the graphics for the University of High School Nature magazine that the Science Club put out. So I grew up with this stuff. Her father was a farm boy turned into an artist, but this is my dad on Okinawa a year after the war ended, waiting for a ship to bring him home to his wife and his 1.5-year-old son. But he had access to a camera then, and it was safe for him to explore, and we have a lot of those pictures. His parents, Harold Wing on the left, was a master builder in the 1920s, and then 1929. His wife, whom he met at Occidental College in Los Angeles, Ruth, we knew her as a deep sea sport fisher and a poker player and an open water swimmer, and she taught us well. So there's Grandpa Reen, Mom's dad, farm boy, real painter, came to San Francisco early on before the bridge with his family and worked at J. Walter Thompson, started his own studio doing calligraphy and watercolor and everything. There's Grandma Claire leading an expedition to the beach right here in San Francisco. She wove that coat, and she wove every chair we sat on, and she wove the carpet runners up and down the house. And when Case Kimati was released from the camps after World War II, came home from Utah, she bought a loom because she liked the way they looked and the way they might work. And she asked my grandma to teach her how to weave. And the rest is Case Ikimachi's wonderful history. And we grew up with these placemats of caves. My daughter was 3 years old and she was having breakfast and she said, look, 1, 2, 3. I said, dang, exactly what we were looking at. So all of this stuff is in our creative mind. These are the books that are still in the house where my parents lived for a long time. Jepson's Trees, geez, title pages. People should do this. End papers. People should do this. This is a book my dad bought in 1943 with probably a week's pay. And I put my name on it in the library, and now I put it in my daughter's name on it. It's in her library. It's California in the West, brand new when it was published by Edward Weston. So he was interested in photography, and some of that rubbed off. Here's my daughter at the DeYoung reading. Here's my son at home reading. Alex is here. Early project. So we'll go right through this to see where all this art goes. When I came to UCSD and the art department opened, there was a wonderful core program. It was surfaces, color work, like Joseph Albers studies, structures, and representation. I was terrible at representation, and I knew I was going to be a photographer. But for the structures course, we went down to National City, which was full of surplus metal yards, and we could buy anything. And so I made these blow in the wind grasses out of aluminum sheets. But that was just my sculptural career, brief. At Cal Arts, which Kevin mentioned as another startup, there was an offset press. And I had a couple of weeks to go before I graduated, and there were no faculty members to teach us how to use it. So Steve Weir and I, a colleague, just learned how to do offset and came up with this book with terrible quality illustrations, but it's bound and it's done, and at least 3 copies exist today. This was 1971. Later, the same work was printed in Swiss Camera magazine, which wasn't afraid to print the work of 22-year-olds. It was really terrific. This is my first real Los Angeles photograph, 1971. So that's where we'll start with the accumulated body of work that I'm working with now. After Cal Arts, Vietnam was going on, and I objected. So I was able to do my alternate service in South Dakota at a nascent Indian-controlled community college in Rosebud, Santa Leshka College, which is thriving today. And so I lived out there for 1.5 years, and the landscape was amazing, and the people were really amazing. I didn't photograph them much. That was their business to invite me. But I loved the land, and I would drive 400 miles on a long weekend to visit someone because that's how far everything is. And it's a special place. And since you had to drive so far, we all learned how to photograph off the passenger seat. And I got really good at seeing things coming and dealing with them and making wonderful pictures like this. Because I was just like any shotgun rider in the Wild West, I wasn't looking for bandits. I was looking for opportunities that continually arose as we drove across the prairie. Back in San Diego, I actually was the first one in my graduating class from Cal Arts who got a full-time teaching contract in art. It was really a special gift. So I started wandering around California, and some of you may recognize that I got as far north as San Francisco. I do have a Northern California passport, but no, this is not a funeral at MIT. These are 2 students moving their bookshelf. But you know, photography describes everything and explains nothing. So who am I to get in the way? Let it go. Ambiguity is really good for photographers, and it's great for good poets. So driving around the West became an opportunity for a real special kind of meditation. Like, where do you stop? And when I'm driving along and I look through the windshield, oh, isn't that great? And you stop and it's not there. Because you're not moving through it, you're there. And photography, for me, is about establishing a precise physical relationship to the environment. Anyway, I look over my children's shoulders. My daughter did this. She must have been 7, 8. Look at the order of things. It's just spectacular. And my son, Alex, was a brilliant calligraphic cartographer at the same age. Look at how he nailed the Bay Area and Point Reyes. He didn't get to Cape Cod for 20 or 15 years after this, but he nailed Cape Cod. And look at those Great Lakes, man. This is what they look like, don't you know? It is spectacular. So I learned from them. This is no good compared to Alex now. It's just a picture. So I used to teach. I rarely did field trips, but when I did, I said, we're going to go out and do what I do, and then you're going to learn how to do what you want to do. And things happened, and things happened. So I used to teach. But during that time, I didn't like any of the existing textbooks. They didn't work on the materials, the way the materials really responded to light and chemistry for artistic purposes. So I wrote this book. One of my students, Pat White, could draw and throw pots and build stuff and photograph and everything. So I had him do illustrations for me. And he understood how important proper exposure was. Because if it's underexposed, no amount of development is going to bring it back. And he proves it with this drawing. He learned. And here's his little picture. You may be able to see it. The lab tech doing proper agitation during film development, and then the gorilla who's messing everything up. Finesses everything. Oh, so this is the last course that Kevin mentioned. Why people photograph. And I offered this course once, and it had its own graphic design look, so everybody could keep it separate from the other classes. And it really starts off saying, you're a spaceman from another planet, a spacewoman from another planet, and you just crash landed and you're okay, but you're wandering around and what is this place and what's it like? And you can orient yourself and prepare a report to send back to your home planet. And then the question at the bottom is, what's really worth reporting? And should you communicate? If so, with whom? It was a fun class. So I had my own answer to that. There's a person from outer space learning about the environment. So you can't read this, but I wanted you to show how I think, and I think really fast. Don't need to design stuff. It's just lying around. So I'm not a designer, but I love to design. These ceramic letters were used in a show in 1979. And Bob and Francis Walker Mooney's gallery. Then they put them away, and then they used them again.
I hate to interrupt
Sorry.
you, but you're off camera when you move over here.
Sorry.
Here's a
All right,
camera.
here's the camera.
So
I'm back.
stay there. Don't wander.
I get excited about walking around taking pictures, and it gets to me. Okay, I'm back, and I have my hand on the steering wheel. So in 1991, I had another show at their gallery, and we used the letters again. And then a few years later, a fire broke out in the space above the gallery, and the water came down and flooded the gallery, and there was mush everywhere. So Bob handed me these letters, and I said, Then I looked at them, and then I said, I'll scan them. And then I looked at them, and I said, that's it. I don't need to design a logo. That's my name. And it looks good in any orientation and in any name, in any scale. So I use it on everything. And it's just a matter of finding stuff. It's all out there. Like this. Somebody apparently moved this stuff. But nobody moved that. It's all just out there. Oh, one more. Okay, so I don't have to learn calligraphy. I just have to walk around Death Valley. It's all there. Odd little projects. This wonderful guy, the late Bob Matheny, a terrific artist, enormously prolific. He called himself almost anonymous. And he was the guy who hired John Baldessari to teach at Southwestern College way back when. Anyway, he didn't like to be photographed, he said. So I said, okay, I'll go to his opening with a blackout bar mounted on my camera. So whenever I point my camera at him, he's covered. Something to do. I got this from the mom of a wonderful former student, and she wrote me a note inside, and I needed something for the faculty show. So I made a wall tag for it and framed it with the note inside that no one could see. And that was my work. And I think it's a great work of art because half the people loved it and half the people hated it. Nobody was on the fence. So that's my definition. I was invited to join a pinhole photography exhibition, which I never do, but I'm kind of a fake engineer. So I designed this camera that uses one 4x5 film holder, which has a sheet of film on each side. And you put it in diagonally into this mahogany box. And it has 4 apertures on it. It takes 4 pictures on 2 pieces of film, north, south, east, west at the same time. And then you're done. I never did take it to 4 corners, which is what the whole point of this camera. So there are a couple of samples from it. It worked, but it's not me. Here's an idea that I don't have time for. There's a man in the desert wearing a camouflage shirt, and his torso disappears. And also his shadow disappears. So somebody could do something with this, just spell my name right. I don't have time to go back to that. It looks like fun. Curating. Duncan McCosker, rest his soul, asked me to do a book with him, but I wasn't quite ready to put my pictures out there, but I wrote him a piece. And our good friend Rex Heffman designed this fabulous book called Bathers. Then I got involved in all these other things. The fishing guidebook, what a thrill. A couple of books with Henry Wessel, for Henry Wessel. And we showed Gary Winogrand. Eugene Beagle was my only real scholarship. Negatives I found in an attic in South Dakota. And my friend Harold Moore had a stack of glass plates and he was excited about those. And I looked at the Beagles and I said, these belong in the Museum of Modern Art. And that's where they went. We showed it at 26 venues before that. Denver Museum, Santa Barbara Museum of Art. The niece of the woman pictured on the left came to our opening when we broke the show at Grossmont College. Terrific. We also got an NEA publications grant and produced the book of Helen Levitt's color work with 36 illustrations, I think, at the time that the Corcoran Gallery that people had heard of had a brochure with 7. So we did stuff. And here's a spread from that book. Marvin Hoshino, her assistant, put that together. Design. I'm not a designer, so just a couple of things. I have a friend who's a master woodworker. So I made him some hats and I made him this and that. And then he said, I need a branding iron for my doors. So that worked out well. Henry Wessel gave, I asked him if he would do another show with us, 76 and then in 2000. And he handed me this and he said, this is the title and I want it to be really light and really airy. You know me. And I said, okay. And I ran this around a little bit in my head and I really played with the type and I love this and it really worked well. He also asked me to write a piece for it, which I did. And I read it the other day and it isn't bad. It was 23 years ago. My office on campus was like 7 feet wide and 13 feet long and 13 feet ceiling. It was part of a photo studio and the proportions were screwy. So I got some mahogany from a friend and I drew it with my friend Rick Rydberg, the wood guy. And I said, I'm just going to turn everything 9 degrees. And that's the hypercubicle. Everything in this room is 9 degrees off. It has little rock bins. It has the desk. It has a little fountain here, a 2-stage fountain, and more rock bins. And if you sat back in your chair and looked at the shelves that went up the wall, my space was bright and the entire campus was a kilter. It was like the best thing ever. Oh, and I had some spare wood, so I made some Frank Lloyd Wright birdhouses. I just, So now we're into the books, because that's the second part of this talk. Future of Press. My good friend Alwyn O'Mara, who, by the way, introduced me to the book club and to Kevin, said, the Getty's not buying any photographs of living artists right now. This was back in the 90s. So let's trick them. Let's make a book with photographs in it. These are gelatin silver prints, and we'll sell it to the Getty Research Library in the special collections. So we did, and they did. So this has 12 prints, books designed by Rex Heffman. There's a tipped-in silver print with the introduction, and they're on boards, and you can take them out and frame them, and you can put them back in the book. And the slipcase was designed by Rex. It's, I don't have a picture here. It's linen lined, stamped with blue foil with the title Dry Spells. You can barely see it. It's shimmering water. And the bag has a nice fit, but it's loose. It's kind of like those canvas bags you'd hang on the radiator when you're crossing the Dust Bowl. It's a wonderful book. There actually happens to be a copy here given posthumously by a former student of mine, Julia Glick, who sponsored this book before she even saw the prints. And here are a couple examples from that book. So this is where we go fast because I have a million pictures to show you. Flow states, another portfolio. It's hard to see the color here, but that's a beautiful silk cloth that Alwyn picked out. She's a book engineer, which is really a super duper book artist who could get the job done. And her friend John Robinson is a letterpress guy. He has his father's press, the Tortoise Press. And I said, John, I need this ink, which is kind of silver and kind of blue, but not really silver and not really blue. And I told him that on the phone, and he sent me a proof. Bang. So there it is. And then he would deboss a little sheet, and there's my, you don't have to write this down. I have a way of getting it to you. And there are the prints, 11 by 14s loose in this book, in this folio. And this is not going to work at this resolution. That's a close-up of the cloth and the deboss. This shows a little bit better. This is another portfolio. This is only 8 by 10, but it's a maquette for a 16 by 20 print portfolio. The glass is museum glass that you see right through. It's like it's not there. And then there's a little silver print to open it, and they're large prints, which look something like that. So those aren't quite books. Alwyn was interested in miniatures because she said we could do a lot of miniatures and show a lot of different ideas really fast. And so one of the smallest ones used aluminum Minox slide binding sheets, which the opening is a pinky fingernail. And that was a couple of books of contact prints made from Minox negatives, sub-miniature. Then we got into the brain stuff. This was earthbound. It's bound in stainless steel cloth mesh that's so fine it feels like silk. Because the contents, this is John Robinson's letterpress, by the way. The contents are sifted desert soils in all the different colors, green, red, black, whatever, earthbound. But the books were so small, you'd put them on display at a book show and no one could see them. So I had to build rooms to code and stickly furniture, and then hire a small person to make the books look big. Thank you, Alex. Here's just an idea. We have the book. This is a 30-year-old idea. This is a way to bind a book without stitching. It's stainless steel rods and a stainless steel cover, brushed metal with some really light and airy desert pictures in it. I won't tell you the title because it's secret, but it'll come out. Then we decided that we needed the Futura Press Encyclopedia. So there's one on art, there's one on journalism, there's one on borders. Oh, and then those were too small. So I said, why don't we do a cookbook, kind of like Earthbound, but with spices. So here's a little essay about spices. And there it is. Now I wanted to show you this close. So you don't have to write that down either. John Robinson put adhesive ink on this sheet, and Alwyn dusted on the cinnamon because the recipe only calls for a dash of cinnamon, not a page. That's a good book. That's the, turmeric. Yeah. And it has a real recipe, so it's a real cookbook. It's in all the special collections. And we do still have a few more to make in this small edition. Oh, that's the cover, cloth that nobody knows about. And it smelled great. So we put it in a plexiglass slipcase to keep the aroma fresh. And then those were too small. So decided on a Magnum edition. And the learning Japanese thing is half the pictures are in Japanese gardens in the US, and the other half are in Japan. And you might not know when you turn the pages. The beauty of this book is that it's bound in Tyvek, that industrial waterproof stuff you wrap buildings with, but you could print on it. And the beauty of this book is I took it to our curator, Marcia Reed, at the time at the Getty, and I put it in front of her, and she said, "This is great." And I said, "I have an invoice." And she said, "Hold on." She ran around the campus and found her boss, and he signed off on it instantly. That was like the best book ever. Broadsides and banners. So books need to be bound, and exhibition space is very hard to find. So I started putting them together. I had a big retrospective at Grossmont. They wanted me to do a retrospective after I retired, and I said, "No, I'll just show the pictures that I have made since I retired, 5 years worth." And there were hundreds of them. You can't read it, but it doesn't matter. They're just millions of pictures. So I put them together in scrolls. And Alwyn built the little rooflets for them to make them look like Japanese scrolls, but with plexiglass bars. And they had a little eyelet, so you could just nail them up. And the show went up very quickly. And it was called mental mapping. Some of them looked like this, the Crest Fire in 2003. Some looked like the Seattle Public Library. Some looked like Arizona. Some looked like Santa Catalina Island, Avalon. Some looked like California. We're on theme here. So that's that show. Then I said, well, I've got this little digital camera that barely works. I've got this little ginkgo tree that's at my friend's house, and when I press his doorbell, I look at it. So I went to visit him 48 times, and these are the ginkgo variations. And this is when I started photographing in Avalon on family vacations, and then it became clear to me that the little cottages were really historical and were disappearing. So this is called street legal. It's just a broadside. The house at the top left is like 521 square feet on 3/100 of an acre. And the house at the lower left is a bigger one on 4/100 of an acre. It's a great little town, and there's still a lot of it there to enjoy. Then I started doing things like this, but I was advised that my pictures should stand by themselves and not get involved in little gimmicks holding hands. So these were called land panels, but I don't do that anymore. This is a quick promotional piece when I was trying to get back into the business in the year 2000. So I did a little timeline of David Wing from 71 to 2000. And I mailed this out to curators and galleries because it was like 42 inches long. And I thought, well, they won't throw it away because it's too long. They'll just put it on their desk and it'll get buried with all the paperwork. And then someday they'll find the end and they'll pull it out and call me. I don't think it ever worked. For fun, I was making the scrolls. So this one is called Beverages for Grown-ups. And it has tea and coffee and red wine. But to be fair, it has a companion, which is Beverages for Young People, which has milk and hot chocolate, and can't remember the other. Pictures, here we are. Sometimes I can photograph in Pig Latin, right here, Berkeley. And then there are all these odd pictures, and they just pile up. Some are very soulful. This is a sacred site on the Big Island in Hawaii. This is my friend Phil's tree that didn't land on his house in Inverness. This is a Bishop Pine that we read about in the early Jepson book, early in this show. And when they come down, the crown just falls. They're just beautiful at any time of their lives. And shadows, what are they doing? The desert is such a surprise. Then there's ice. And there's Tijuana. You gotta love Tijuana. They're always doing something there. Always life. Salt Lake City. That's what I saw. The legend here says Tide Hut. It's right here in Sausalito at the old Army Corps of Engineers Bay model, which is a beautiful thing to visit even now. That's the tide. Oh, and that's the Pacific Ocean, that sign at the bottom, in case you were wondering. Wow. This is not your grandparents' Laguna Beach. So what do I do with all this stuff? I'm letting it inside my head now, okay? They stack up kind of like this. Then there's a picture like that. People say there's nothing out there. No, it's just that it's full of light. So these started piling up. And I said, oh, well, it's time to do a book. So I sketched out this thing. And then I took a flight to Chicago and drew the whole thing out on the back of a boarding pass. Then I said, Sandy, my brother, I don't know what to do here. I've got these beautiful pictures, but you're the professional designer. So, and I want it in 3 languages because a third of the tourists in Death Valley are from Japan. Another third are from Germany primarily. And then some of us speak English. So this is a trilingual book. And my brother laid it out, the 3 inks. Oh, I had to get a former student and his mom, which is a wonderful way, different generations to interpret what a poet turned my English into. And they wrote back and said, it's really good. The poet said that it's very light and airy, like not having your feet on the ground. I said, that's it. So there's the book. It was printed at Steinauer Press. What a place. Just wonderful work they did. We were very lucky to work with them on this spectacular volume. They understood exactly what I wanted, that high light with the open shadows, but not anything styrofoam and not anything chocolatey, just the right kind of airy mass. Picture on the right wasn't taken on this planet because you see there are 2 suns casting shadows. So I need a strategy after that book. So I made up all these little miniature maquettes about 20 years ago. And then I had the titles and some of them had covers, but I needed to get organized. So this is as far as I ever got organized. This is basically what it looks like in my office. And that's the most organized I've ever been in my life, but I still can't find things. Those little drawers are apparently a music, sheet music cabinet, and they're perfect for doing 12 books at a time. So that's what I do. This is one of the problems in my archive. I have negatives and then I have prints, and then I have a picture that I finally decide I like. This is shot through a plastic sheet. It's just a 4x5 contact print, but I don't have the negative. So I wrote myself a note, no negative, dope. But I can still show it to you. So then I have to select and sort. So I lay them out, and this might be as many as 9 or 10 books starting to string out. And then I go back to my really old notes and look for titles. This was for a book called Book of Books. And then I go through all the landscape pictures. And then COVID came, and I was basically at home to be safe. And I started a blog called Mixed Documents. For some reason, no one took that title, even though Ache had an album of prints 100 years before with that name, which I thought was a perfect all-encompassing title. So I would post twice a week with a picture and a little bit of commentary. After 2 or 3 of these posts, my friend Bernd Reinhardt, a real photographer on his own, said, hey, that's a book. I said, really? So it became a book. That's the 2nd issue. And there's the 3rd issue. And it has pages like this. There are copies in the back and you can read it. And it has pictures like this. Look at this guy. He's a plane shifter. He's holding the branches up out of his way while he cleans the inside of the window. So he is not from around here. And there, the blog doesn't explain any of the stuff, but it's a little bit about some of the ramifications of it. Here's one from the blog. There's Shasta Dam, which I visited as part of my Guggenheim project, looking at water resource management in California. It's all the engineers and hydrologists tell me that there's no such thing as a normal winter in California. This marquee, which shows the rainfall, shows that the annual rainfall average and the annual rainfall in that year, I believe, was 1980, was off by 0.02 of an inch. So there's photographic evidence that California did have one normal winter. And here's the dam. I thought I was pretty cool because I had a large camera with a big negative, and there was a guy photographing Shasta Dam with an Instamatic. His negative was 13 by 17 millimeters, and mine was 58 by 84 millimeters. But the downstream face of Shasta Dam is 22 acres. So that's 22 million times the size of my fancy big negative. So back up a little, Dave. So there's the story of that. And so we're going through the blog, and I laid it out like this, just blank and fill in the blanks. And I showed this to my friend Bairn, who said, "Hey, that's your cover." I said, "What?" I always do what he says. There's the cover laid out front and back. And there's the whole jacket. And there's the book. He also suggested that I use try Smart Press to produce my work, because they had good press work and enough different paper choices to make me happy. So that's the first Smart Press project. And there have been 18 things in 3 years. And here's another version of the blog. Comes out every 6 months for a while, and then I got really busy, so it only comes out once a year. Then I have all these odd pictures. And Gary Winogrand used to say, some pictures are like that. You try to throw them away, and they stick to your hand. And so I keep all the sticky ones, and I put them together, and I say, gee, these are related somehow. There's the tide hut. That's related to, oh, Earth. Okay, now I get it. There's a book. It starts off with my essay. Wherever you are, that's your culture. I thought someone else said it, so I wrote to her, a colleague of mine, said, did you say that? She said, no, you did. And I made a book of everything you said in class. So I get credit for that little statement. And here's the book, Traveler's Advisories. And it looks kind of like this. It's things that you see and signs that are trying to tell you something. But they tell me different things. This is my favorite part, actually. A lot of us photographers complain that you have to have text of the book. Nobody will publish a book unless somebody writes an introductory essay that's a mile long. Well, this is for those guys. You can tear off all of this text material at the dotted line. It's perforated. And you can throw it away. And then all the legal stuff is right there in vertical, the ISBN and all that. And I'm thinking strategically, maybe somebody will buy 2 copies and they'll tear one off to prove that I was right. And then they'll keep one untorn for their collection. There it is. Tear right there. Sequencing. So here we go. I've got these. This series starts out in color and ends up in black and white. These are just made on walks in the Santa Monica Mountains near our house down there in the San Fernando Valley. And then turns out that they fit together. And then turns out that 80's not too many. And they all fit into this book called Brushwork. Then I've got these pictures. I mean, there's one koi there that's not from this planet, but it's in the school there, the middle one. And, you know, family photographs. There's Henry Wessel, the day I met him in 1976. We're wandering around. I rarely have captions for my pictures, but I like this one because they're building the Iberian Peninsula. Right there on Avenida Revolucion in Tijuana. Barcelona, what a place. Oh, then it looks like, hey, they're all verticals. And I never take verticals. So each of these has a special sensibility. I asked my Uncle Don, who wrote the David Wing for the blog cover, on an envelope and mailed it to me. I asked him if he could spell verticals for me, but he was trained as an architect and they don't draw like that, so he declined. And I just scribbled it and it looked good. So that's Uncle Don spelling my name, and that's me writing verticals, and it's a wonderful collaboration. So there are 2 books. I do them in pairs because I get a wonderful opportunity at Smart Press. If you have the same paper and the same inking, the same spec, they will do up to 5 different versions for you. You could do 5 titles in a single press run because it's digital. They just turn a switch and make the second book, turn a switch and make the third book. I thought about doing 3 or 4 or 5 at a time, but 2 is all I can keep in my brain. Back to the hypercubicle, another view, another gravel bin. You can see the ladder going up to the diagonal shelves. But I had a whole bunch of design stuff and I needed to do a book. This is my quarantine project in my neighborhood. So I spelled quarantine in different typefaces around the neighborhood with chalk. And then I asked the kids to see how many, if they could figure out the word, how many different words they could make with those letters, which turned out to be a lot. So here's the book. It's laid out like this, and it's called Design on the Side, because I'm not a real designer. Came out great. How's my time left?
40 minutes.
Okay, we're gonna have to speed up because I do have a couple of tricks for you at the end. Here we are. The just grace all over. Very particular. Evolution. Vital Signs, good title. I kept it for like 30 years and finally got to use it. Then there's Going Around the West. It just grows on you, all this stuff. This story is, I thought this was a little contrived, even though it happened. And I showed it to Henry Wessel, what a dear friend. And I said, you think this is contrived? And he didn't even think. He just said, no, both doors are open. It happened. Okay. Terrific validation. One eye on the road. And I talked a little bit about Avalon. That first one is it's all coming apart. So I went around really fast and it's changing very fast. And I laid it out really fast and it's a book. A little bit down the coast, they have a place where you have square waves. Ocean Beach near San Diego. And I wandered around there. There are lots of alleys and there are lots of, we just live here, we're gonna do what we want. And that's another book. And we'll just go through these. Here's a spread. This is about the landscape in 3 parts, what it kind of looks like, how it's changing, and what it looks like now. The Auburn dam site, abandoned after the faults were found in the 80s. Now it's being turned into a recreational site. There's the cover, Unnatural History. And I love this cover. These 2 pictures are 4 years apart, but they're the whole story of kids playing in the sand and bulldozers repairing a dam that's failing. And you can actually take the middle of this book and throw it away because the story's right on the cover. We'll go through this. It started out as a broadside, but it's really a children's counting book. And you just counted giraffes. Some are fake giraffes made of twigs. And it goes up to 15. And it's in Kiswahili in big red letters, and then it's in English in little gray letters. And then there's a quiz at the end, none. Okay, we're getting toward the end. This book was written in 1875, probably the 3rd one about rowing in the English language. So I started rowing when I was 73, and I looked for books to help me. I found a book by a 14-year-old Pakistani who wrote about her first year of rowing. And I found a book by an Easterner who wrote about learning to row at 40. I said, that doesn't help. I'll just write my own. So here's my rough table of contents. And that's how I finally figured out what to do with all my notes. I wrote a table of contents, and then I spread them all out. And then I got a book. And beginners love it, and coaches love it. And my son's second day of rowing, my friend Phil's 63rd year of rowing, he loves it too, because he doesn't remember how he learned. And so I'm able to share my experience on the learning curve. Rex has only been rowing for 40 years, but he let me row this scary boat. That's in the humility chapter. So there it is, into my skull, out of my mind, because that's what it does. So then there are more weird pictures. And we'll go through these really fast because there are a couple of books that are happening here. And the weird pictures lead to, boy. Now we're at the extra part. These all started grouping. You've seen some of these before, but now they're grouping. Now they're forming a book. And the book is one of four. It starts very wide. It narrows down a little bit. This is the third volume, and it's called Town. And I love this book because the back cover has my late mentor, Ben Lifson's front porch. The front cover has my late mentor, Henry Wessel's side yard. So you can throw the middle of the book away and just keep the cover, and it does what I want it to do. All right, so then there's this one. Oh, that's right here, by the way. It's just out. This started coming together. These are all the odd pictures and sequencing. My young friend Eli sat down with me, and we decided that there were two categories. One is apprehensions, and one is more like anomalies. And the characteristic of a picture that's an apprehension is like, oh, that's it. So we sorted them out, and I came up with, and I tried to read my handwriting, but I couldn't. So I had it OCR'd, but it didn't help. Technology isn't everything. So I went to the Oxford English Dictionary, and there it is. To seize. Nothing is affirmed or denied of the object in question, but the mind is merely aware of it. What a perfect way to photograph. So I scribbled that out, and it's legible. So these are pictures for the book called Apprehensions. And somehow, this isn't necessarily the sequence of the book, but you'll see they're related in that seizing, that being aware without trying to figure it out. Whoa. Ends up with ashes and water and ice. There's the book. There's my mom reading Jhumpa Lahiri a couple years before she passed. And there's the book. I can prove it. I wanted to show you this cover because it's a narrow book, but SmartPress can nail those spines and get the type right where you want it. But my A was a little big, so I let it hang over. And I know it was a success because my friend Tim picked up the book the other day and tried to brush that off. He thought it was a speck, but it's ink. I love to do that. Well, this is one of my best pictures of so-called nothing. It's got a tree, it's got the western light, it's got a cozy cabin, it's got a book. And this reminds me that Robert Adams has been constantly encouraging my work for almost 50 years. So we're almost done. This is the thing. And we're almost ready for questions and answers. But I'm thinking, being very willful here and thinking that one of you here or out there might say, hey, David, what's your next book? So I'm going to answer that preemptively, and then we'll get to your special questions from here and far. Okay. Oh, but Helen Levitt is blocking my my private work because I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing. So she's got this secret button. What do? You click on it. Okay. Boom. Oh, Helen, you devil. So maybe there's a password. Okay. I'm asking you now, what's the most essential thing for a book? What's the most essential element of a book?
Paper.
Paper. Okay. Yell. Scissors. Oh, I get it. Click on the rock. Now we're in. This is my secret place. Nobody knows about this. So I made a table of contents for this talk because there's so much stuff to organize. And I made it look like a book because there's so much stuff to organize because I've been thinking in books. And so I designed a front cover, nice, clean. And then I said, well, I'll design a back cover, really messy, which is where all this come from. And then, well, I'll just put the whole thing together like a sheet, like I'm pretending to make a script for the talk. And then, oh, Kevin.
Right here.
Would you like to open this?
Should I be nervous?
Yes. On camera, please.
Now he's the camera expert. Oh, it is a book of picture book talk. You actually made a book
It's a book
for
about
this
now.
talk, a book about now. I don't know if you can see that. That's exactly what he showed. It's cool. You're gonna sign it?
Of course. Oh, I'm sorry. There's another slide.
Yeah.
Just one more.
I thought so.
Yeah. So the other thing Smart Press can do is variable data printing. And I called them up and I said, what's that? Usually they only ask two questions. How many do you want? And when do you want it? They're marvelous. And I said, well, what is this data thing? He said, well, you can print anything you want in a specific location, anywhere in the book you want. So I just sent us a spreadsheet. So I sent a spreadsheet with 1 through 100. So these are all numbered. This is number 1 for you. And then they're alphabetized A through Z for my sponsors. And then there are a couple of oddities for odd people and a couple of extras in case some get damaged in the mail. So they're in the back room and it's up to Kevin to decide how the book club is going to use 100 copies of this book, which is my gift to the club.
Oh, wow.
Wow. And you can flip through it and it actually says in the book that these are the things that I probably would forget to say. So I wrote them down for you. I just want to call your attention to that little gray line there. I didn't have time to design a jacket or to print a jacket because I figured this out at the last second. So I made a fake flap. It folds over and makes a little shadow printed right on the sheet. So I'm learning to speed things up. But this went a little over, but thanks for being with me because now I've released all of this stuff to you and you're responsible for my past and you're invited to see all of this in the books in the library afterwards. But let's hand this off with my thanks to Kevin.
Well, don't go anywhere because we have time for some questions.
Okay,
Let's send the lights up here
okay.
and let's,
That means we're done.
that means we're done.
This means we're really done. It's dark.
And it's
Okay.
darker up there. And then we're gonna close this so people on Zoom can see our big old faces.
Okay.
And then you can close that. And close that. No one needs to see us up there. Great. So now people on Zoom are seeing both of us. So let me. Camera's all the way over here. Great.
Yeah.
So let's take some questions here in the room. We'll start one over here.
Your use of color is quite minimalistic. I wanted to hear your thoughts about color in photography and your thoughts about the monochrome, the black and white thing I saw.
Well, let's see. First part. Color is dangerous.
Why?
It demands too much attention. It's like, oh, we were raised to go for red fruit and find food that way. And oh, that's red, it's great. And Kodachrome was designed originally with very strong reds. And I enjoy using color, and as you see, I've gone back and forth, and it's really easy to go back and forth now in digital. but I figured it out finally. Color is a whole bunch of adjectives and adverbs. And good poets don't use adjectives and they don't use adverbs. They use the right word, the right noun, or the right verb, which carries that special extended meaning. So I say, be careful with color. Ben Lifson used to say, people would ask him, how do you use color film? He said, just like black and white, namely where you stand, what you put in, what you leave out, when you press the button, and your figure field relationships are the most important thing. And that helps you tone down. You don't photograph because it's red, you photograph because it's clear, because you apprehend it. But for me, I grew up with a Leica and Tri-X, so my core competency is monochrome, and I love it. The brushwork book, which you can look at in the library later, it starts out in color, but as I was working, it wasn't clear enough. So the book gently fades naturally with the pictures that we're taking into monochrome, and then you can really see that stuff. You can really see the relationships, you can really see the structure, you can really see how you see, which is quick. And I'm leery of it, but I shoot a lot of it, particularly in places where, why not shoot color in Mexico? Because they love it. And I can learn to love it very carefully by not getting too excited about anything, but excited about what I see, and let it not break its spirit by making it too crazy. Anyway, hope that helps.
Thank you.
But it's the adverbs and adjectives that I try to get rid of everything I write, and I try to be careful as I use color in photo.
Another question here in the club rooms. We have one on Zoom, which I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
How does looking at your old images influence what you're doing now? And are there old images you like more now than when you first made them? Two-part,
Yeah.
complicated question.
I like looking at them, especially this way in a retrospective with your help, because it keeps me from repeating myself. Not that I really do, because I'm a new person every day. I'm fortunate to feel like I'm growing as a person and visually. And so I'm usually thinking of new things, but this keeps me in touch with what I've done, so I don't have to try that again. It either worked and I don't have to do it again, or it didn't work and I don't want to do it again. And the second part was,
Are there images you like more
Yeah.
now than when you first
a
made
lot of them grow on me. The ones that stuck to my hand, now I have a reason for that, because they're siblings of others in my collection. And they're a family that I didn't know I had. And so I put them together, and then they're at a family reunion banquet, and I say, oh yeah, you're the crazy cousin, and you're the one who went to college and started a company. You're the one who paddled down the Yukon River in a canoe, and we never heard from you till today. But all of those people are related somehow. All those photographs come to form these. I just realized yesterday that, or the day before, that when I was preparing here, each book is a sensibility. Each book is kind of a set of cousins related somehow. So yes, the old ones develop a new life, and I develop a new relationship with them, and I can see that they're related to each other and to me, and I can make use of them.
Another call for a question here in the club rooms? Sure.
Do you use digital or SLR? What are your cameras?
I've used everything. The first word you said was digital, so I can say that I taught my first digital class in 1991.
Well,
And so I watched it come of age, and finally Leica came out with a full frame digital camera onto which I could put all of my old lenses. The camera was very expensive, but it was cost effective because I wouldn't have to buy film. And that really opened it up for me, because then I could, I didn't have to reload every 36, which I was happy to do when I was younger. But now it's kind of like, oh, I'm just getting rolling here. You know? So the hand camera is what I really like. The one of Shasta Dam and many of those others of the Western landscape are a handheld roll film camera with a nice big negative. The Death Valley work is all 4x5 view camera, along with a lot of the stuff in the West. But for now, I have to admit that a lot of the stuff in the recent books is with my phone, because the phones are unbelievable.
Yeah.
They solve the total relationships without having to work too hard. They're brilliantly sharp. For the page of a book or even a print this big, I can make exactly what I want. And as you can imagine, I'm behind on my making of original prints, because I'm a book of every other month club guy right now. I've done 18 books in 3 years.
Can you tell us about the edition size for books?
Yeah.
You've done a number of books. Do you have a standard edition size? Does it vary?
Normally I do 250 in a run, and then 50 for corner damage or display copies or whatever. And one or the other of these might become a trade edition for the publisher at some time, but I really don't have time to wait 5 years for somebody to publish one of my books, even if they love it. So I'm doing it, getting them out there. And if I were to go to someone, they say, yeah, we'd like to pick this up. How many of you printed on your own? I say 250. That's not going to bother. That's not going to interfere with a trade publication. So I can get it started, make it the way I want it to look. And then if I need to negotiate later, that's okay. I've made it my way. And then if they want to make it their way for their market, I'm open to that.
One last question here on Zoom. Do you miss the darkroom experience? Watching the pictures come to life right in front of you?
Now that's magical. But I spent a lot of time in the darkroom, and I wasn't outdoors breathing fresh air. And when I moved to LA, I built a big, beautiful darkroom in the basement with rubber mats. A friend gave me a water control panel with temperature control and filtering, spigots for everything. And I bought a big print washer, and I had real ventilation, and I had track lighting with different colored bulbs so I could look at the prints in different colored bulbs. I made a drying rack for 80 prints so I could keep printing for 4 or 5 days without waiting. And then I brought some prints to a curator, a good friend of mine now, and she looked them over. And she said, we would like this one and this one. And I said, oh, I'll make you a big, beautiful 20 by 24 print in my new darkroom. She said, no, I want the vintage print. And then I went home and I said, I don't think this is going to work.
Yeah.
So I asked a bunch of dealers. They said, you can make prints for your kids, but you're only going to sell vintage prints. And none of us make prints when we're young. We're scratching around to get film and paper, and we make a few prints. And I always printed the wrong ones. And so I don't have a very big collection for my retirement, but I'm having a great time making them available with books. And if someone says, do you have a print from book I number 39? I might have it, and I can look for it. I don't miss the darkroom. I do miss having negatives because I've got a NASA quality scanner that I got quite accidentally by a man who found a man who gave up Photoshop in Canada. And he just sent it to me and said, if it works, you can pay me. If it doesn't work, we'll figure it out. And it was new in the box. I'm a con scanner, and it's just every grain, in every tone possible. So I'm enjoying living in my archive now as much as I enjoy stepping out in the street here and making a picture.
Last call for questions here. Otherwise, I'm going to ask my question. Got to close with my question, which is, what was the inspiration for the giraffe counting book? I'm just curious to know where that came from and how that came to your mind.
Our good friend Paul Katesho in Kenya took care of us for a week and took us around to his favorite places in the south of Kenya, in the elephant reserves and near the hills near his house. And we went out one morning to look for giraffes. And we saw one, we saw two, and we saw three. And they figured out that we were driving along, just looking at them. And they decided they could walk along with us and gather along behind one layer of trees. And that went on for a couple of hours. And they just kept coming. They came over the hills in the back, and I just kept shooting. I had a digital camera, so I could just keep shooting. And then I said, gee, this could be a nice way to learn how to count in Swahili. And to tell you the truth, I actually had to crop at the end because there were too many giraffes. To get down to 15 giraffes for the 15-page, I had to crop.
What was the name of that book?
Twiga, which is giraffe in Kiswahili.
Or Too Many Giraffes, maybe.
That would
That
be-
should have been, that's the sequel. Too
That's-
Many Giraffes. So thank you, everyone. Let's have a big round of applause for our speakers. And I want to make sure you have time to come see some of these books here in the library. So make your way towards the library right after I just wrap us up real quickly for the folks that are on Zoom. I invite you all to join us for our next in-person and virtual program here in San Francisco. It's actually in 2 days. It's an unusual Wednesday program, October 18th at 6 p.m. The program is titled We Are the Land, A History of Native California. And our speaker is William Bauer, enrolled citizen of the Round Valley Indian Tribes, author and professor of history at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. And this is a program that is co-presented and co-hosted by our good friends at Litquake. So you can join us here on Wednesday for that presentation. You can register for that event and any event that we have here at the book club by going online to bccbooks.org/programs or using one of the links in the emails that you're probably getting from the Book Club of California about our programs and events. So thank you everyone for joining us in person and on Zoom. I look forward to seeing you at another book club event. Thanks and have a great evening.